Hi, Dr. Patrick Gentempo here, and thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. We have great content in store for you. I'm so excited to be here with you, and let's jump right into it. Saifedean, thank you so much for taking some time to share your experience with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I looked at your bio, and it's kind of fascinating, your background. What got you into what you're doing today, writing a book on crypto, etc. So maybe start with your academic background.
I was doing my PhD at Columbia University in sustainable development, and it was a PhD program that was based in economics. It was basically very close to an econ PhD. And I was very interested in studying economics, and a lot of it didn't make a lot of sense for me, what I was being taught at Columbia. And then I came across the work of the Austrian school, which was very influential and caused a complete change in my worldview about economics and much more. And one of the most interesting facets of the analysis of Austrian economics pertains to monetary economics and the difference between gold and fiat money. And so that was something that was extremely interesting to me before Bitcoin was around. And then when Bitcoin came around, because I was interested in those things, naturally I heard about Bitcoin, and I just kept hearing about it. And I was pretty skeptical initially for quite a while. I heard about Bitcoin pretty early, but I was skeptical for quite a while about it, and I didn't really bother study it properly or understand what is going on. After years of coming up with smart-ass ways of explaining why it's going to go away and die, and it continuing to not die, and it continuing to rise, eventually you take a closer look. And when I did take a close look at it, I was fascinated and amazed at the fact that it can work. It's very robust. It's truly decentralized. Nobody controls it. And it's got a very good chance of surviving into the future. And it has been doing that. And it's been also appreciating significantly, which makes it an enormously important economic opportunity, I think, for the world today. So Bitcoin is kind of like a black hole in that it just keeps drawing you in. And you dip your toe. You think you're just dipping your toe to take a look, and then the quicksand of Bitcoin takes you in, and it just becomes all consuming. And so over time it took up more and more of my time and my research interest. And I was a university professor in the Lebanese American University in Lebanon, and I was I had my day job, but I was spending most of my time learning and reading about Bitcoin. And eventually I decided I was going to write a book about Bitcoin, because I had so much to say, and I was constantly saying it to people online and constantly getting into discussions online. And I decided it would be much better to, instead of arguing with people on Facebook, to just put all of these ideas into one manuscript. And that's what I did.
Interesting for me is that studying at Columbia and then becoming a fan of the Austrian school, they seem almost incompatible in many ways. And but let's talk about that, because I think we're looking at, and for people who might not understand, maybe you could explain the fundamental premises of the Austrian School of Economics and how that might relate to fiat currency versus something like a decentralized currency like Bitcoin.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll just add that Murray Rothbard, maybe one of the most important Austrian economists, also did his PhD at Columbia, so it's not all bad. But yeah, it was definitely, there was definitely nothing Austrian going on in Columbia when I was there. I'd say the differences between the Austrian school and mainstream schools of economics, the fundamental difference is in the starting point. And the starting point for Austrian economics is that value is subjective, whereas the starting point for all mainstream schools of thought is that value is something that we can measure. It is objective. And so that's, this starting point will help you see the differences in methodology. So mainstream economists rely a lot on mathematics, whereas Austrian economists rely on using the English language or the German language in many cases, but using grown-up words to communicate complex ideas, whereas mainstream economics is highly mathematical in a place where I think the math doesn't add value, and it only adds the pretense of value. Another difference, of course, is the understanding of value as subjective immediately makes you likely to appreciate the fact that individual choice is what matters, that the ultimate satisfaction that is sought from all economic activity is individual personal satisfaction. People get out of bed in the morning to look after themselves, to make their lives better. And it teaches you a lot of humility about assuming you understand what it is that people should be doing or what is good for them. Because if value is subjective, it's very difficult for you to determine what other people should be doing with their lives. They're the ones who have the knowledge of all of their circumstances and conditions and all the things that matter to them. So this is why from the Austrian school you would tend to, people from the Austrian school would tend to have a perspective that is more sympathetic toward having free markets, having people buy and sell things as they please rather than central control. Whereas if you believe value is objective, then it's something that can be managed mathematically, and you get the smartest people in the smartest universities to run these equations for everybody else, because they can run equations much better than all of us. So you end up with a much more top-down, central planning focused approach to economics from the mainstream perspective, as opposed to the Austrian perspective. And when it comes to money, and this is perhaps the crux of the disagreement, the most important practical aspect of the disagreement is when it comes is money. Because from the mainstream schools of economics, money is something that the state decides, and money is something the state needs to manage. Whereas from the Austrian school, money is just another market good. It emerges on the market, and government is not needed for it to function. Governments need money, and they impose on the market's choice, but they are not the ones responsible for the market's choice.
Yeah, and I think that that distinction's very important here, where you're seeing a free market, which is more decentralized, less government controls into the economy and into the currency. And what we see now, of course, especially in the United States, with the how much currency is being generically used in terms of they're printing all this currency, adding devaluing the dollar through the central manipulation of the currency. And now we have this thing that comes along called Bitcoin and these altcoins, which basically say, hey, nobody can manipulate this. No government's in control of it. It's decentralized. But in the beginning, you said you were skeptical around it. So what was your skepticism built on?
Ignorance mainly.
Okay.
I hadn't spent much time studying it, and I think many people make that mistake of just assuming, this thing's been running for a while, but obviously I know the reason why it can't work out. And the deeper you dig, the more you know, the more you come to understand why it can actually work. And so my initial impression was that governments would shut it down, or that it would be hacked, or it's just software. It can be changed. There's going to be politics behind it, and people will succeed in changing the money supply, and then we're back to square one. I think perhaps understanding that mining was turning into a very big industry around 2013, 2014, that was kind of the light bulb moment for me, when I realized that, okay, this is truly something that's expensive to produce. It's not something that people can just easily make by changing code. So it involves very significant amount of economic activity in order to create it, and there's a huge industry that's built up around it. That forced me to start paying closer attention to how it works, and then I started figuring out, how secure the system is and how robust it is.
And once you start digging into that, and then you start to see that it's secure, it is robust, do you feel like the prices that Bitcoin is trading at today are warranted? And do you feel like it's got a lot of upward potential? What do you think the future holds, moving on from here?
Yeah, I think, if Bitcoin works, and if it just continues to work, if it continues to churn out the coins according to the schedule that it has, and if it continues to make clear transactions with a new block roughly every 10 minutes, then it's inevitable, and I argue about this in my book, it's almost inevitable that the price is going to go up, because the new marginal supply created every day is declining. Every 4 years we drop the new supply by half. And so at any point in time, the production today is one half of what it was 4 years ago. And so if Bitcoin just survives for these 4 years, then it's going to have half the marginal production at the end of those 4 years that it had at the beginning. And almost certainly it's going to have more demand because it's survived for 4 years, it's proven itself. And people who tried it for small amounts will have more trust and will be willing to place more amounts in it. And people who hadn't heard about it will have heard about it and might be willing to put in a little bit of money into it. So, the longer it survives, the more its track record attracts more money for it. So you're likely to have less supply and you're likely to have more demand. And it's kind of a trap, really. I call it it's an all-conquering juggernaut of economic incentives. Everybody has to submit to this because it's like this trap that Satoshi Nakamoto set up for the rest of the human race, where as long as anybody can buy and sell this thing, then it's likely to be significantly more valuable 4 years from now than it is today. And so what are you going to do about it? Well, you can cry and you can shake your fist at the sky and you can say that it's not fair, or you can take advantage of it. And I think the rational course of action, which many more people are beginning to realize, is that, this is a great thing to have. If you have a technology for creating a form of money that is reliably scarce, where you know exactly how many units there are and you know that nobody has the ability to make more of it, that's actually extremely valuable. And I think more and more people are going to realize this. And I think Bitcoin still has an enormous way to run. I think it's not just to compare it with government cash. I think it's far bigger than just government money. I think the real the main dish, the main event for Bitcoin is the bond market. Because if you look at the global bond market, people don't buy bonds because they're looking to make returns. They buy bonds to beat inflation. It's the part of your balance sheet that you're holding on to in order to preserve value, in order to not take risk, in order to make sure this is there for you in the future. And the point behind bonds is that they can beat inflation and they don't have equity risk, so that if the company goes bankrupt, bondholders get paid before equity holders. So bonds are sought for this safety, and it kind of worked for the first 20-30 years of the fiat standard from 1970 onward. But now bonds offer negative returns or zero return or very close to zero returns in nominal terms, and in real terms they offer significantly negative returns. And so there's about $100 trillion or so of bonds out there, but Bitcoin is much better in the fact that it offers exactly zero nominal return, but it offers significantly positive returns in the long run in terms of its appreciation.
Thanks so much for being here and watching that video. And can I ask you to please subscribe to our channel so you can find out when we're posting new content. You'll be alerted right away when we do. To share this with people you think might benefit from the information, and certainly it helps us if you like the video. So if you like what you just saw, go ahead and hit that like button. And again, thank you so much for being here with me right now.